Hello, this video is talking about PALS, or how to read and write more critically. So PALS is an acronym that you are going to hear a lot of. It is an acronym which means that each of the letters represents a different word, and it's an easy way to remember that. PALS stands for purpose, audience, language, and structure. So these four things are essentially building blocks to being a better writer and a better reader. The reason why we consider this is it helps make central ideas clearer because it helps give us a framework for planning to write central ideas and give that message across, but actually gives us a framework for deconstructing and makes it a little bit easier for us to construct texts more seamlessly, and which, as a result, will make us become better readers and writers. So, how this is going to work is I'm going to be talking about these things individually and then talking about how they work, giving you some examples. What you need to do is to write down notes based on what I say in your workbook, which are going to be checked next lesson. So I suggest starting by writing down these four words with some space to write underneath. Now, I'm giving you a warning. Some of these things, when I talk about them, will bleed into each other, but that's because these four areas are actually really interlinked. So it would be a very good idea for you to rewatch and go over elements of it. Okay? So purpose is why a text exists. Generally speaking, there are three purposes to any text. Is it there to entertain, to inform, or is it there to persuade? Those are the three very basic purposes. That being said, other texts will have multiple purposes in them. So they will be there to entertain, but also inform you of things. They might be there to inform you of something for the purpose of then persuading you to think a certain way. Understanding the purpose of the text sets up everything else. It sets up who it's talking to, why it's talking that way, and the language choices. So it's really important to understand the purpose so that we can then understand the audience. The audience is who is a text directed to, or who am I directing a text to? So who is my audience, and am I the audience for a text? If you think about the audience, what it is whose voice is coming through, and whose message is coming through, and who is it directed to. Okay, when you look at audience, again, and purpose together, what you get is an understanding of the who and the why. The how is language and structure. Language and structure really go together in terms of the choice of the words that are being used. Is it subject specific? Is it slang? Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it expert language? Does it speak with authority? Is it begging? Is it pleading? And then the structure goes with how is that organized? So in a narrative, if you're constructing that, structure is simple. Is it chronological? Or is it non-linear, which means it jumps back and forth. It doesn't go in a straight line. Or structure could be, if you're writing an essay, does it talk about a text in terms of characters, or does it talk in terms of themes? How you structure your message and the words that you choose are really important. And that's the language and the structure, the formatting, and the actual choices that you make. All the choices that have been made by the writer that you're reading their work. So they're related in a very simple way. As a writer, purpose and audience decides the language and structure that you use. As a reader, the language and structure help to reveal the purpose and audience. So an example of this would be if you were writing an information text about climate change, and you pitched it to a high school student in year 7. your language choices are not going to be the same if you pitch that same language to a HSC marker. In the same way that if you're writing a response on a novel, let's say a book review, trying to get your cousin who's 12 to read a book, as opposed to explaining your opinion to a teacher, the language choice is going to be different. When you're pitching it to an older audience who are experts, you need to use subject-specific terminology. You need to use higher modality. If you're pitching it to someone younger who isn't an expert, more basic language might be needed. And it might not have to have thematic ideas. Whereas if you're writing about a book to me, you definitely need to be talking about themes. I don't care about the plot. I want to know what it's about, not what happens. So knowing who your audience is and knowing the purpose of the text drives why you use the language you do. And as a reader, it's actually kind of the inverse. If I want to figure out the audience and the purpose, I actually need to look at the language and the structure. You know, is it a really, if I'm reading a narrative and it's clear and it's set full, and it's clear and it follows chronological progression, I'm going to make the assumption that it's actually not for an older reader, because generally speaking, books and stories that have clear chronological things with nothing hidden are for younger readers because it's an entry point. In the same way that if I read an essay that hasn't got modality, it means they actually haven't thought about who the audience is. They haven't thought about me and me as an expert. They've actually written it without an audience in mind. And it creates a weaker response as a result. So, just as a bit of a summary, PALS is purpose, audience, language, and structure. And they're interlinked. Okay, by understanding how they work and what they look like in a text, essentially what you're going to be doing is creating a foundation for deeper deconstruction as well as better construction, because they are so inextricably linked. If you don't know who you're writing for, your language choices won't make sense, which means your purpose isn't going to be clear. If you don't have an interesting structure, it's not going to be clear what you're trying to say. And so if you grasp these ideas and start to actually use these 4 elements in your deconstruction, in your language when talking about a text, what you'll find is that 1, you'll understand text a little bit better, but also you're going to be able to construct text a little bit better. Because the goal here is for you to be a more critical thinker when it comes to your writing and when it comes to reading.